Um, she does have a big head. This isn't a fan translation, but the actual localization of the gem that is Jake Hunter Detective Story, Memories of the Past. A game I found while looking for smooth and jazzy detective game OSTs to expand my background music folder with, and stuck around with cause the thing looked hella charming, simple, and didn't seem to take itself all that seriously within the detective genre. Still had to double check if it wasn't some edgelord meme translation though. Although Memories of the Past is a 2009 game, the Jake Hunter series dates all the way back to 1987, where it was released in and limited to Japan under the name of Tantei Jinguji Saburo. And did so with success. Honestly. This little detective mystery murder adventure series was rated very highly by Japanese players, growing out to a true adventure star with each and every entry. And thus they decided to test the waters abroad as late as 2008 with Jake Hunter Detective Chronicles. And flopped. Yeah, shit was really bad. Despite being a localization of an already released DS game in Japan, they cut half the game and probably paid the localization team in McDonald's coupons, as the dialogue is half-assed at best and unreadable at worst. So the localization team probably got their ass beat by their superiors and were ordered to fix their dumbassery, as the re-release would get a re-release only 11 months later, in Jake Hunter Detective Story, Memories of the Past. And this time around, they actually got things right. Still not sure if this wasn't written by a 15-year-old Reddit user though. Now, imagine this. You're some semi-serious overconfident asshole fucking schmuck with a sig addiction that started his own semi-serious detective agency, only employing a singular employee, being your secretary and right hand, Yulia. People in need of help come to your office with unsolved mysteries that you then get to the bottom of through unconventional methods, until you find yourself bringing your fists to a gunfight against some Chinese gang members. And somehow coming out on top by kicking and punching through the means of the good old Textbox.
Dude!
That's the true Jake Hunter experience. The game is divided into 6 episodes, all following separate and mostly disconnected case files. Every episode basically plays out the same way. Jake accepts a mysterious case that he'll then attempt to solve by visiting various locations to inspect the surroundings and talk to people, to unveil even more stuff to inspect, to then talk to people about. After which he ends the day by pumping his lungs full of smoke and organizing his thoughts and acquired information in a fun little memory minigame that is usually followed by a groundbreaking, plot-thickening event. After which, it ends the chapter with a to-be-continued cliffhanger type screen that's more goofy than anything else. Memories of the Past is an interactive novel type of game, and that most certainly isn't for everybody. You spend most of your playtime clicking through text boxes to learn about and get closer to whatever true depiction of unfortunate events you're looking for. There's the occasional use of the inventory to make Jake show his business cards, or a gram of cocaine to get people to talk, or have him use his cell phone to call Yulia for assistance. And there's also a journal that keeps track of any relevant information about the case. But those are just side dishes to the main course, that is, the streamlined interactive novel. Some would consider it a bit too streamlined perhaps. Memories of the Past approaches the whole detective idea in a laid-back fashion. What I mean by this is that the game never really slips into the repetitive fail state where the player missed a pivotal piece of information or fucks up horrendously into a game over screen. Whatever area Jake's investigation brings him to, the game simply prohibits you from leaving by Jake's inner thoughts telling him he isn't done investigating the area yet. So that leaves you with no choice but to inspect everyone and everything. Talk to everyone available and repeat until the magic text box tells you it's time to dip. And the multiple choice dilemmas don't matter all too much either. It's often an all paths lead to Rome type of scenario, with all options resulting in the same outcome. And even if there is a quote-unquote wrong option, Jake's thoughts will at the very worst tell you it's a bad idea to pick said option, or close the dialog box, after which you can simply try again. It prevents the game from falling into adventure game hell, where you have to constantly visit the same location over and over, inspect the same irresponsible drunk cougar, and having to listen to the same asshole police officer telling you to fuck off. Only to then gain information about the suspect's preferred breakfast. Though I must admit, that does mean the private dick work isn't as private dicky, and the suspense isn't as suspensive, leading to situations like i.e. this one, where I kept sneaking behind the evil murder man for far too long, instead of timely jumping him, making the story adapt to my stupidity by making the shrewd criminal miss Jake with his first bullet from like 2 feet, and graze the equally distant Chinese agent Rio with the second, only to then perfectly have his gun shot out of his hand by a Fed showing up at the perfect timing. But the game's compelling writing more than makes up for it, turning it into a bit more of a casual detective experience. Even though the game contains 50 to 100 spelling mistakes, localization team, the writing has vastly improved upon whatever lazy half-ass script they ship Detective Chronicles with. The writing is rather unusual for a detective game, or any game at all really, as it's rather informal, tongue-in-cheek. I could have had this conversation type of dialogue while simultaneously being clever, fancy, descriptive, and full of words, moments, twists and turns that'll make you go, "Oh!" I guess what I'm trying to say is that the game has a lot of character. Some will find this down-to-earth approach to a detective game a tough pill to swallow, understandably, but I found this to make for realistic and fun dialogue that made me laugh and caught me off guard, repeatedly. There are no goofy escapades, senseless crosstalk, and no unexpected powers from above needed to bring each case to a satisfying ending. No. Instead, you get a mature and believable experience in which Jake clashes with no-conscience drug dealers, low-IQ punks that'll do anything for a quick buck, and a powerful mob that happens to control a good chunk of Jake's hometown, Aspicio. Talking to these folks, you quickly get a sense of who's who and what they're all about just by how they speak and express themselves, which would not have been as strong of a feature had they not taken the kitty gloves off. The cop being hella aggressive because of a bad experience with a private dick in the past, flipping off Jake in all sorts of ways possible. The Salvatore mob airhead minion constantly threatening to put a bullet through Jake's brain no matter what he says, and even the desperate and hurt little kid Kurt, acting and speaking as desperate and hurt as a kid would be. Thanks to the down-to-earth writing, these conversations got so much emotion and personality to them, which in turn massively contributes to selling this game's story. Jake himself is a fantastic protagonist in that sense in particular. He isn't exactly a professional detective, nor does he pretend to be. Accompanied by a cigarette addiction that couldn't be any worse if he tried to, he just kinda does investigations his own way. Nah, I'm dead serious. This guy won't walk down the street without lighting one of them sticks, and the game's hint option is him lighting one up and pointing you towards your next move. Either way, Jake won't hesitate to get blackout drunk the night before heading to a circuit that would result in a disaster. He won't hesitate to bribe shady characters in shady hotels for information, and he most certainly will not hesitate to take evidence with him so he can get some use out of it. And this I don't give a flying fuck lifestyle translates into his attitude and conversations just as easily. Jake doesn't take himself or anybody else all too seriously, no matter the rank or level of threat to his own life. Casually calling high-ranked Officer Kingsley an old man, giving the degrading term of bums to homeless people, and activating horny mode as soon as any female comes within a 10 feet radius, ending each and every sentence with babe, sweetheart, doll, and any nickname you can think of. But underneath it all, his heart is in the right place, and the cases hit him much harder than he's letting on. The player gets to peek into his thoughts and thus truly gets to know Jake via his inner narration, full of pessimistic, grim, and worried thoughts and remarks, truly caring about anyone and anything involved, carefully digesting information to bring the case to a good end. He's a keeping up appearances type of guy, but his right hand Yulia can see straight through that facade and tell how he really feels, which is a great character on her own really. Hell, the entire supporting gang is. There's Yulia, naive country girl turned detective assistant in a criminal city. A title that's no more than a title, as Jake sees her as his equal, and her calculated and clever thinking makes her just as good of a detective as Jake is, with her sassy sarcasm and care for Jake being captured exceptionally well. There's the slightly minor characters like Ryo Hasu, a cold-blooded, all-business no bullshit Chinese government agent that'll only talk if necessary. Or the lovable old man detective Kingsley, that's captured about as lovable and old-manable as can be. And even the characters that only have time to appear, develop and leave in the time span of a single case are hella convincing. An old mob boss handing Jake his favorite booze as a gift, a dweeb nerd with a guilty conscience, a fraudulent doctor. They're just as interesting, if not as detailed, as the main players, and that serves the story really fucking well. Surrounded by descriptions of events, objects, surroundings and characters, and conversations that are about as voluptuous as can be, even the unimaginative should be able to imagine Jake Hunter's world and its characters. What it looks like, what it feels like, what it smells like.
Unpleasant.
And not a single back and forth between characters is left rushed or awkward, accurately simulating the twists and turns a conversation can take, complete with shifts in tone and or emotions. resulting in moments like these, where Jake heads to a local police department to talk to Detective Sharp about his current case. Upon entering the department, Jake immediately describes the facility down to a T. Notices, talks to, and has to convince the receptionist to have Sharp head down, and while waiting takes the opportunity to observe and talk to the people heading in and out of the department. There's some rough-looking yet concerned tattooed biker with a kid, some rich kids that will have no problem paying their bill, an old lady clutching a set of bike handlebars that Jake has no problem age-shaming, and some angry-ass fella that's mad about his speeding tickets, in a world of much bigger crimes. Only to then figure out the places Jake's been to and the people he's talked to aren't exactly what they seem, opening up a whole new can of worms to explore and deal with. Which is a whole strength on its own really, as the plot and its characters develop and come together in genuinely interesting and intriguing ways that never lost its grip on my attention. Again, this is mostly due to the detailed and immersive writing, but also the ideas that form the foundation to write upon. Not only do the cases take place in different cities with different atmospheres and different people, but they also vastly differ in content and even narrative structure. Sure, the first two cases start with the typical man calls detective agency to solve a murder or find a missing person script, but on the one hand you end up with a heart-wrenching revenge story, while the missing person on the other ends up missing because of much deeper and entangled in underground spooky business type of reasons. Case 3 onwards, the game then lets go of this formula, with Jake reuniting with an old flame, asking for an innocent, yet not so innocent robbery investigation. Or what should have been a fun day off at the racetrack, ending in a bloody and horrible disaster for all parties involved. Case 4 is really cool in particular, as it entirely takes place in a flashback Jake's telling to Kingsley on a sunny day in the park a year later. And while the game sporadically made use of switching perspectives beforehand, it's this case's signature feature. In part 1 and 2 of the case, you play as both Jake and Julia, working on seemingly separate cases at the same time. Only for the two of them ending up being an interconnected mystery part 3 onwards, with Kingsley having to properly recall everything that's happened in every part at the end of each one. It's a cool and refreshing touch that really shines a new light on things. Most of the cases are set through from Jake's perspective, and this case just left me craving for more insight into i.e. Julia's thoughts and feelings. But having an entire case dedicated to this very idea was pretty cool regardless. And then I haven't even mentioned the titular case, which uses a funky gimmick to tie the prior cases together and create a whole new adventure around it that I sat through in a single sitting, because I had to know what happened next. Shit's really, really good. And I ain't spoiling shit. The writing is still a little overdone at times, due to its aforementioned streamlined approach, with Jake getting groundbreaking calls right as he runs out of leads, or finding someone bleeding out right before it would have been too late. Don't get me wrong, people do get hurt, and semi-important people do die. But in the end, the climax comes down to all's well that ends well, never really shocking the player with the unexpected. Not to mention the fifth case, the red-eyed tiger, having the shortest, most rushed and boring ending of them all, almost as if they had to catch a train by the end of writing the script. Other than that, I really have no complaints about this thing though. While Memories of the Past mainly revolves around solving mysteries by visual novel style, there are still a handful of basic text-based puzzles that, while not exactly difficult, still added value to the game to me. Figure out the shortest amount of time to get cars to a destination and back, answer questions about the history of China that I somehow got right first try, or solve fictive murders by the way of riddles. None of it ever comes anywhere near challenging, and everything being multiple choice means you can just discard unlikely answers or spam every answer over and over, since there's no punishment for failing. But it's better than nothing, and at least it gave me a fun few minutes of connecting the dots and cracking what's in front of me. It's better than nothing is a fitting way to describe the overall look and sound of the game as well, though I didn't mind in the slightest. The backdrops are static, the characters have no animations, and there's only a handful of nothing crazy-ish, jazzy tracks. But yet, it's got its charm to it. The visuals do a good enough job at capturing the grim atmosphere of the investigations, merging photorealistic locations with realistic and expressive character portraits that genuinely are a joy to look at. Their ink sketch art style, their gloomy and dreary facial expressions, even the smiles and happy moments are downbeat due to everything going on in the investigation. A few times a case there's a semi-animated cutscene included as well, that, while making me want more than a few seconds at a time, look pretty sick with what looks like hand-drawn animations. And the soundtrack, while simple and short, consists of nothing but bangers, making me jam along to the theme song every time I booted it up, like It's mostly simple lounge jazz with rather short track loops, but shit's hella catchy. And even though the game doesn't have the biggest track list, each case file has its own individual theme that never has the chance to become annoying due to each case taking between 2 and 3 hours to beat. Not to mention the tracks blending perfectly with the more somber tone of the game, creating a simplistic yet hard-hitting aesthetic that grew on me the more I played. In contrast, the game's extras provide much more lighthearted, charming and amusing scenes and ideas. Presented in chibi-style graphics, you can enter passwords obtained in the canon cases to access goofy visuals, a jukebox or additional staff comments, and play through zany 15 to 20 minutes additional investigation. Despite their short length, these cases actually do pose a bit of a challenge to your detective skills, as picking the wrong option at any point will result in a fail state, which then sends you back to the goddamn title screen, making you mash through 2 minutes of introductory dialogue again. The cases themselves though are fun, and most definitely worth spending an extra hour or two on. You get to solve a murder case by the means of deduction, after gathering info from all the possible suspects that haven't left the house, or rearrange photos as Yulia by figuring out the chronological order through Jake's case report, after KOing him into a wall by accident. And the chibi art style in which it's all presented is hella charming and amusing, allowing for more variation in scenery and or events. Hell, the chibi characters are even somewhat animated too, which was about as cool as it was surprising after the mostly static portraits for 20 hours of playtime. The passwords, however, had an even bigger surprise in store for me. And it ain't a pretty one. While the unused character profiles, movie gallery and whatnot are rather interesting and worth looking at, it also gave me one of the most uncomfortable video game experiences I've had in a long time. There's a password in the game that spells Aqua. A password that will start a cutscene sequence for the sake of staff comments, where Yulia in chibi form heads over to Axis Games headquarters to interview the developers. It then takes a whole minute and 21 seconds for the developers to reveal themselves being sexually frustrated loser creeps. This entire staff comment section is a simulation of disgusting weirdos objectifying and sexualizing a woman, while she's also in the room, making it a simulation of a form of sexual harassment and intimidation as well. It's 7 minutes of them drooling over her being a hottie, staring at her breasts, thus making her feel uncomfortable, and being all like,
Guys, we should have really given Julia bigger breasts, guys. Double D, triple D, the more D's the better. Oh, I have no problem rubbing one out without lotion.
You can see me visually pausing after every moment to regain composure, after having my stomach turned upside down. It was so fucking uncomfortable to sit through this. I even checked another ROM if this wasn't some messed up fan translation. But no, this is real. They've gotten away with this because the game never got popular outside of Japan and sold like trash. But let it be known that the official translators over at Axis Games are disgusting human beings that thought it was okay to write and code this garbage. Even as a joke, this shit is nowhere near close to being funny. It's like spilling a glass of wine on a fancy suit that ruins an otherwise good look, as the game itself was nothing but enjoyable. The plots, twists and turns are interesting. The areas couldn't be described any better. The characters and the conversations with them are realistic, memorable, and build personality very well. And even the extras are worth looking into, as there clearly went a good amount of work into them, resulting in a fun 20-hour plus experience I won't forget any day soon. But as soon as I witnessed the creepy shit unfold after beating the second case, the rest of my experience was overshadowed and partly ruined because of it. I had a very hard time ignoring the fact I was playing a game translated by weird perverts that honestly shouldn't have any translation rights, and that just ruined the mood like a punch to the gut. Axis Games translators and the company as a whole, y'all should be ashamed of yourselves. Deeply ashamed.